Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo. It's great to be with you today. I am Gary Michuta, your host and sensei for this hour, and, where we learn how to work out our intellects and be better witnesses of Christ, learn how to explain, defend the faith with clarity, charity, and confidence, and, just gain a greater knowledge of the world so that we can do that. And part of the program, we look at different faiths, and from the perspective, of course, of Catholicism. Today's program is a really interesting topic, and it's basically about a false prophetess who appeared on the American scene in the 1800s, who claimed to have a revelations from God in regards to the second coming, an invisible presence in the tabernacle, in the heavenly tabernacle, I should say, that Christ entered into the Holy of Holies in heaven, and also had some teaching regarding health. And that is none other than Ellen Gould White, who is the foundress of the Seventh-day Adventist. And so we're going to have our good friends, Arthur and Theresa Beem, come on the show. And we're going to talk about this aspect of Adventism that really doesn't receive a lot of attention, but it is very interesting, and that is we're going to be looking at their teachings on health, and what better time to do it than during this COVID scare. So they'll be coming on over the first break, and they're always a lot of fun. I love having them in the dojo. I always feel like I'm in their front room, chatting about apologetics and all sorts of really cool stuff. So they'll be coming up on the other side of the break. As always, we look at Finding the Fallacy, which we look at an informal fallacy, just to be aware, to sharpen our thoughts and think critically. And folks, we need to think critically about everything today. You just can't assume that you're getting good material. That, by the way, even includes the sensei himself. Don't take my words as gold. Check them out for yourself. And so one of the Finding Fallacies today is a biggie. It's a huge one. In fact, it's something that I think every Catholic apologist has to be aware of, and that is quoting out of context. So we're going to talk about that. And also we meet one of the early church fathers. Today's early church father, by the way, is Leporius, who flourished around 426. Not a household name. Not by any stretch of the imagination, but nevertheless, we need to learn about these early church fathers and their writings. So, great show in store for us today. Before I begin, as always, this is the custom in the dojo. We have to give our little bows to everybody, and my shout-out, my hat tip goes out to all of you watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Hello, everybody. Thank you, SMPOJC. Appreciate it. And also, I want to welcome all of you listening on radio around the country and also around the world via podcast. Yes, this show is also available on podcast, so which is a very handy thing to have because, like I said, we have all these great guests, lots of information, and many times you're driving in a car, you're live streaming, whatever, you just can't catch everything at once. So, what better way to access the show and review the material than to download it on podcast? And you can also do what I call apologetics in place. You can share it with your friends on social media, tell people about it, like, subscribe, do all those things, and you're asking yourself, well, how can I access this information? Well, you can go to virginmostpowerfulradio.org, our flagship website, or if you have the handy-dandy phone app, you can always access all the shows, not just Hands on Apologetics, but all the great shows that we produce. And and I also want to thank everybody for subscribing to the Hands on Apologetics channel on YouTube. We really appreciate it as well. You know, that gives greater visibility, and God willing, we can reach more people. So let's see. If you have any questions for the Beams, you can give us a call at 888-526-2151. That's 888-526-2151. Or you can always send your emails to questions@handsonapologetics.com. That's the official Dojo mailbox, and I do answer your emails. So let's jump into the Finding the Fallacy, shall we? Which today is the quoting out of context fallacy. This is this has to be at the top of the list. If you're going to be aware of any fallacious reasoning as a Catholic apologist, you need to be aware of quoting out of context. This occurs all the time. In fact, all you have to do, whenever somebody cites or quotes something, look it up, read it in context, read the first couple of verses early, before that, and a couple of verses after that. And then ask yourself, is the person who's quoting this thing, does their interpretation fit the context of the passage? Okay. If it doesn't, then they're pulling words out of the passage. This happens a lot, especially with the Bible. Bible quotations. For example, somebody they'll just throw out these words from Scripture, and you know them, you heard them before, so you just assume, I guess the Bible teaches that. Don't do it, folks. Look it up in context, read before, read after, study it, make sure it makes sense. Because a text outside of context can become a pretext. And it's always a bad thing, And that, by the way, not only for critically examining other people's positions, but make sure you do the same. Don't just quote something out of context. Don't pass this around. It's worse than the COVID virus, right? Don't pass it around. Make sure you're interpreting things in context. Make sure that, especially when you're quoting outside the Bible, other passages as well, make sure that you're showing charity by accurately presenting the thoughts of the sources you quote. That's our Finding the Fallacy for today, the quoting out of context fallacy. Why don't we jump to meet the early church fathers? Today's early church father, by the way, is Leporius. Like I said, he's not an Augustine, he's not a Jerome, he's not Athanasius, or one of those early church fathers that it seems like everybody knows about. Rather, who he is a humble monk from Gaul, which is modern-day France. So Leporius was a monk in Gaul, probably from the diocese of Treves, when, because of his heretical doctrines, he was obliged to leave the monastery, got booted out, and he became a homeless wanderer. His journeys brought him to Africa, where he met the great St. Augustine, and there's a name that everybody knows, the great doctor of Hippo. And, of course, Augustine, with his towering intellect, was able to help Leporius and cure him of his heretical tendencies. And so what happened was that at the Council of Carthage, at a certain unknown date, probably around 426 A.D., Leporius submitted a profession of faith in his new Reformed faith, his Orthodox faith, and this is known as the Document of Amendment. And it was forwarded to the fathers of Carthage, Bishop Aurelius, Augustine, Florentinus, and Secundius, and also the bishops of Gaul, along with a cover letter, which is known as the Letter of the Bishops of Africa to the Bishops of Gaul. How's that for on-the-fly translation of Latin? It's number 219, by the way, of the collected letters of Augustine, just in case you want to check it out. And this letter basically recommends the now Orthodox and properly chastened Leporius. From the letter of amendment or document of amendment, it's evident that Leporius' former errors were largely in the area of Christology, where he actually held a kind of Nestorian understanding, actually before even Nestorius came out. And of course, Nestorianism believed that there was in Christ not just two natures inseparably united in one divine person, but actually two distinct persons, a human person and a divine person. So according to Cassian and Genadinus, he was forsworn. He was also a forsworn Pelagian as well. And of course, Pelagianism, what's that, folks? It's a heresy where basically you deny original sin, that you can, by your own natural powers, do things that are pleasing to God and kind of earn salvation. So you also had Pelagianism also mixed up with this strange Nestorian Christology. It is of no great importance in itself that Leporius' Book of Amendment or Document Amendment, revised somewhat by Augustine, no doubt has achieved a certain prominence and celebrity as a monument of Christology. So this is a very, very important work in terms of Christological work. And let's see. I don't think I'm going to have enough time. I was going to read a little bit from it, but if I do, the music's going to come up, and I'll probably only get a couple of lines. So I'll just leave it right there with the document amendment and our early church father for today, Leporius. So stay tuned, everybody. We are going to have Arthur and Theresa Beem on, and we're going to talk about Ellen Gould White and the teachings on hell. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
In 1 Corinthians 13:13, St. Paul says, "So there abide faith, hope, and love, these three." According to St. Ignatius of Antioch, faith is the beginning and love is the end. And God is the two of them brought into unity. Then comes everything else that makes up a Christian. May God grant that we may attain all the virtues that make for authentic followers of His Son.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is? Will it be a boy? Or will it be a girl?
We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president? Or maybe a doctor?
Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Mary Ann Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526 2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody, to Hands On Apologetics. And I am so excited to have our next guest because they are Theresa and Arthur Beem. Of course, they're a good friend of the show. We've had them on several times. Unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, however, there won't be a video, which is too bad because every time they're on, I feel like I'm sitting in their living room, having a chat over coffee or something. But anyway, as you know, they are converts to the Catholic faith from Seventh-day Adventism, and you can access all the great stuff at arthurandtheresabeem.blogspot.com. And Arthur and Theresa, welcome to Hands On Apologetics.
Gary, thank you so much. Oh my goodness, we're excited to be here again.
Thank you for inviting us on your fantastic apologetics show.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your flexibility, too. I'm sorry for that last minute, let's do phone type thing. So I really appreciate that.
No problem.
And you kept from having to do it here.
I thought. So, let's talk about, I know most people, when they think of Seventh-day Adventism, they don't think about health regulations or anything like that. They usually think about, end times scenario. Of course, worshiping on the Sabbath day. Why don't you bring us up to speed on this?
Sure, and I'll do the short version because you could go on about it. So essentially, it all started back in the approximately mid 1700s. Not with Adventism, but with a guy named Dr. Benjamin Rush, R-U-S-H. Okay. He was one of the actual signers of the Declaration of Independence and an advocate for what? Simple diet and vegetarianism. And he was known all around, even before the 1800s, for these particular things. He wrote, he spoke, he did all kinds of things. And then in 1827, really, is when Ellen White, the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, was born in New England. So you have a lot of water under the bridge and a lot of established health, let's say, ideas at this point. And I guess you could say doctrine. Yeah. But loosely interpreted, more it was a big push for this diet and vegetarianism. Mm-hmm. So when she rolled around in 1827, she grew up steeped in this. She heard it. I'm sure there were, those old posters you see about different topics around before they had TV and internet of topics like this. And so by the time, 1827, so when she was in her early teens to mid-teens, she was reading all these concepts. Well, two of the biggies that she would have read and been contemporaries with would have been Dr. William Alcott and Sylvester Graham from the Graham Cracker fame.
Okay.
So...
Well, Dr. William Alcott was the father of Louisa May Alcott, who was the writer of, Little
Correct,
Women.
Yeah. So Alcott, he taught a simple diet also, and vegetarianism also. And also, I won't get explicit, of course, because we're good people, but, how food affects your sexual morals and the things you should and shouldn't do. And they were the ones that started to connect it with moralism through what you eat. So Ellen G. White in 1827 being raised with this whole entire concept, the whole entire Northeast and really the United States was booming with these concepts of vegetarianism. And then it broke into the morals, and then it just went crazy from there. So now who's on the scene is Ellen G. White, and she starts doing her own pieces on health and what you eat, and then it expanded to what you eat. It just showed if you're a good person or not.
Yeah, there were health gurus all over the United States. They don't really discuss this much in American history, but if you go back and study Benjamin Rush, you'll find out that these concepts were there, for at least 100 years before Ellen White came on the stage. But she supposedly had, it was June 6th, 1863, she had what she considered a great vision where an angel of God, which the Seventh-day Adventists call her accompanying angel, she was given this vision on health reform. And so now what she did was basically baptize all these concepts that she'd heard, and she culled from them and wrote several books, including, and the really big ones for Seventh-day Adventists are the Councils on Diet and Health, Councils on Diet and Food, and the Ministry of Healing. Those are some really big, even today, Adventists will give those books away as part of their evangelization. And they have, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has over 600, well, it's actually 691 clinics and hospitals. They reach over 22 million patients per year. And the main thing they teach in their hospitals and in their education, their medical evangelism is eating healthfully. And they're very proud of the fact that Adventists live longer than most people in the United States. I mean, they're known to live.
I think their publications now are saying 3 to 6 years longer.
Longer than that. And it's because they push a vegetarian diet. So.
Right. And it's really key to become oriented with their thought concepts, is they really have two main ways of evangelizing. One is through their health concepts, like we're talking about, and the other is through eschatology. Those are the two main things. So a lot of times, any of their advertising, they won't talk about anything about theology, really. Not that it won't come into it, but they talk about all these health concepts.
Right. They have all these stop smoking clinics and stuff like that.
Right. And if you're ever going down the road and see the big signs with the beast from Revelation on it, you know it's Seventh-day Adventist. That's kind of what they do. Yeah. So I don't tell me if I need to pause, because
well, why don't we dig in a little bit into that, because that's interesting. I know as you were describing like the prehistory of this vegetarianism and its ties to morality and things like that, I was thinking, boy, thank God things have changed, that there aren't any health food quacks out there that make all these extravagant claims about eating, but apparently, that was alive and well. When would this be? The early 1800s?
Well, right. Benjamin Rush was in the 1700s.
1700s.
Wow.
Okay.
It went way back.
Well, the Seventh-day Adventists began their, quote, health form ministry after she had her vision in 1863. So, the later half of the 1800s is when the Adventist Church went from just teaching about Sabbath to incorporating this idea, at Sabbath in the last.
And let me add one little snippet. We do this research, we do this from our own experience to help Seventh-day Adventists. It's not to smash them. See, when we came out and were converts into Catholicism, we had nothing. My wife's book, It's Okay Not to Be a Seventh-day Adventist, there were very few books out there to help.
Oh, yeah.
And so we want to be a help. We want the bad information about Catholicism to be dispelled, and we also want Adventists to know we want to dialogue with them. We want to reason together. And, we're not here just to smack them around,
Sure. Yeah.
So, 1852, the famous Harvey Kellogg was born. Well, he became fast friends. When he grew up, he became fast friends with Ellen G. White.
Well, Kellogg was the doctor who started the pretty much the big famous cereal movement. I mean, he's Kellogg from the Kellogg cereals, and he was a Seventh-day Adventist, and was a big follower and prodigy of Ellen White.
Right.
So.
Right. So now there is another man in research you'd run into, and that's James Caleb Jackson. This guy was a health guru, and he actually had the largest health spa in the world, which James White and Ellen White, they would go there and help with their own problems, and this is where she did writings on health. They were just really influenced by him.
Yeah, he was one of those. And that's who Ellen White attributes to a lot of her. What she says is the angel gave her the vision before she had any other influences. But as soon as they had the vision, she wrote all these pamphlets about it, which were incorporated into these books. But she went directly to Jackson and Graham and Alcott.
Yeah, to their writing.
Yeah, and pulled them from that. So
right,
interesting.
Right, and then had her vision, which basically.
Well, no, she had her vision first, and then she took it. Yeah.
Right. That's right.
Anyway.
Yeah. So, like you said, there's these two main aspects of Seventh-day Adventism, where one is eschatological and one is health, and it's interesting because the eschatological stuff that was off the Millerite movement, and she kind of like tacked on something to the movement. It sounds like, in regards to health, it's kind of the same thing.
Right. Yeah, she did.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, when you believe you're being taught directly by God, you can just pretty much add anything you want with the vision. You have the authority of their visions. You know what I'm saying? And so
do not take either one of us wrong. We're not mocking her in the least, but it is curious that if there was anything that they really wanted to push, or she would have a vision over.
Right. She would have a vision to give her the authority to say whether something was good or bad.
Maybe it's just happenstance, but it looks a little peculiar.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So
to say, go ahead.
Probably we should, because I'm sure most of the people listening aren't familiar with Seventh-day Adventism. Maybe if you could outline like what is permitted, what isn't, and if could you be a smoker and be a Seventh-day Adventist in good standing?
No. As a matter of fact, in their baptismal vows they take, you are not allowed to drink, you are not allowed to smoke, and if they find out that you do this, you can be ejected from the church.
That's from the church, man.
Okay, well, we'll pick it up there. I hear the music coming up. We're chatting with Theresa and Arthur Beem about Seventh-day Adventism and their views on health. So stay tuned, folks.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. It's www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR, live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin's Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
This This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And here's an easy way to support us by going to smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center or Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And when you log in your Amazon account and you purchase products, a portion of it will go right back in supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And it doesn't cost you a dime. I want to thank you ahead of time because that supports us year-round. May God bless you and your family. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
Welcome back, everybody. Hands on Apologetics, and we're talking with Arthur and Theresa Beem about Seventh-day Adventism and their teachings on health. And I'm sorry, I kind of lost track of time in that last segment because it's so fascinating. So, yeah, it'd be great if you could kind of outline just exactly what those teachings were. And, for example, you mentioned smoking. I didn't realize that smoking was that much of a religious obstacle.
Oh, yeah. Out of the, it's the church manual, the current church manual. If you are eating unclean meats, like from Leviticus, pork, shellfish, any unclean meat, or smoking or drinking, you can actually be...
Or having alcohol.
Alcohol, that's right, alcohol. You can actually be ejected from the church. It's still in there, and that is all founded. It's interesting because if you talk, and I want the Catholics that are listening to hear this, is that to be talking to an Adventist nowadays, some of them are just going to totally refuse this and say, oh, no, that's not true. Well, they're not reading the church manual. And it's like the tussle. It's the tussle over old versus new. Where they'll end up, not really sure, but it's still in there. And it's one of the foundational stones of the church is meat eating, unclean meat, can't do that.
Ellen White even went so far as to say that if you don't have a vegetarian diet, you're not really going to end up being a Christian, because she wrote in Child Guidance that of those who are waiting for the Lord to come, meat eating will eventually be done away with. The flesh will cease to be a form of part of their diet. That's a quote from what she said. And she also said in another place, she said, our habits of eating and drinking show whether we are of the world or among the number whom the Lord, by his mighty cleaver of truth, has separated from the world. That's a direct quote. So she believed that eating was an actual standard of how you can tell if somebody was a true believer or a true Christian or not.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, so by this, and this was done through a revelation from an angel, supposedly.
Of course, yes. Any of this that is of importance to them, to that level, yeah, all of it has to do with having a what was her phrase? Not a guiding angel.
Yeah, an accompanying angel.
An accompanying angel told me this.
Well, she would rewrite history. She went back and she said the original sin of Adam and Eve in the garden was that of appetite, and I don't mean just regular. I'm talking about the appetite of I was hungry and wanted an apple, therefore I went against God. And then she also believed that the manna, she specifically said, this is one of her quotes, as a general thing, the Lord did not provide his people with flesh meat in the desert. So she talked about Israel, because he knew that the use of this diet would create disease and insubordination. So by eating, the Lord deprived them of meat
Right.
and gave them manna so that they wouldn't go against Moses. So
Right.
she thought that this food stimulated.
Like it had something to do with being a vegetarian or not.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so meat to her made you immoral. And Kellogg, of the Kellogg's food, cereals, he created cereal in order to help people with the vegetarian diet, so they would be more moral.
Right.
That
Right.
they would be less inclined to do something evil by just eating good food.
Right.
Wow. So how did they explain the quail, though? God sent mail, but he also sent quail.
Oh,
Right.
but see, that showed, how they grabbed it before it was even cooked, and they grabbed it and stuffed it in their mouths. And see how wicked they were? They just twisted that and said that was the Lord sent that to test them,
Okay.
So.
Wow.
Now, an interesting way to put it for our Catholics that are listening is when you're talking to a Seventh-day Adventist, look at it like this. Eating fish might be considered a venial sin.
Eating any kind of meat, just any clean meat.
Any clean meat. And eating unclean meat, pork, shellfish, would be a mortal sin. So
Gotcha.
basically, if you're to do the equals, it's vegetarian diet equals Christianity. And that's kind of slipped in from kindergarten on. So it is kind of in them. Now, they may argue the point, but you can't. I mean, it's in their books. It's in the very books they teach.
But I don't think we made clear.
Uh-huh.
The Adventists go back to the Old Testament and Leviticus, and they pull out the unclean meats, and they believe that those are still very valid till today. So Adventists would consider it a mortal sin. Quite literally, a mortal sin to eat pork or to eat any kind of shellfish at all. Adventists don't even eat fish. They're not supposed to even be eating fish. Now, a lot of Adventists today do. But
it was very common as a child. We'd be going to the grocery store, and you'd see your parents flipping the can around to see if there were any kind of meat products in it.
Yeah.
They would analyze. This is back in the 60s and 70s before it was really popular.
Right. It was, if there was any kind of pork, any kind of
lard,
any lard, man, my family would not get, and my family were liberal, but they would not. If we went out to eat, they'd ask, well, was this cooked with lard or did it have shell? My mother wouldn't even eat it if it had been cooked on the same pan as shellfish. So,
yeah,
very, very Orthodox Jew in that sense.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so there's kind of a pecking order, though, because with Jews, you're absolutely forbidden from unclean meat, but you can eat clean meat. But apparently with the vegetarianism mixed in, all meat's bad, but some are worse than others.
Right. That's
right.
Okay.
Well, Ellen White wrote that meat should never even be placed before our children because it has a tendency to deaden the moral powers. That's what she said. She said that when you eat meat, it robs you of your sympathy and love. I mean, she said that in Counsels on Diets and Health, page 390. She said that when you eat meat, it allows the lower passions to assume control of
the phrase was, she said, it animalizes human beings.
Right. It blunts their moral sensibility.
Right. Right. So when you look into the history, say, of Kellogg and his, and the history of his sanitarium and all that she was a part of for a while.
Well, he owned a huge sanitarium, which is basically a health spa, today's health spa. But he had an international one where people came from all over the world to be healed.
Right.
And go ahead. I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
No, just a lot of the focus was kind of weird. It's hard to even say it in public. I mean, just some very odd concepts of what it supposedly did to your morality and what it made you do physically to yourself and to others, or not do to yourself and to others. It was
Well, my grandmother and grandfather worked for N.A.J. Harvey Kellogg Sanitarium in Dallas, which was, the sanitarium is just another word for a hospital. You know, and it was one that, sanitarium, it just was, you don't just go in and get taken care of. You stay there. You live there for a while, and they kind of...
It's like a mixture between like you're going to rehab and a hospital.
Yeah, it's
combined
like
into one, and
right.
they also incorporated their health concept.
Right. It was like you went off to a wonderful health spa that you stayed for weeks at a time, and then they would help you eat properly and would get you over your stuff. And
there's an important statement that I wanted to make clear. I was going to do it after telling you about Benjamin Rush.
Okay.
About Ellen White is, for years, people kept on saying she was a prophetess. And she wouldn't exactly come out and say she wasn't. She would just kind of hem around about it, you know. But then her actual words are, "My work includes much more than just this name, prophetess, signifies. I regard myself as a messenger and entrusted by the Lord with messages for his people." So the big argument amongst Adventists and ex-Adventists is, well, she never said that she was more than, but everything she has ever said was, what she had to say was greater than prophets, which I don't know how you can get around when Christ himself says what he does about St. John. You know, come on, you know, he's the greatest of all. You know, we never could figure that one out, but this is what you're dealing with, is when she said something.
Yeah, if you believe that she's a prophetess, then you believe...
Or beyond.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. I'm not sure what that means.
No.
But that's what you're dealing with. When you're talking to a Seventh-day Adventist, they don't deal in philosophy because they think philosophy is evil. And they won't deal in theology if you disagree with them. So it's a difficult difficult thing to deal with when you're dealing with these two forks, one, the health and the eschatological problems, is you kind of have to deal with them through love. Because, I mean, they might be kind people, very kind. We grew up in a lot of our family members are still Seventh-day Adventists, but dealing with these topics is very challenging.
Yeah, because their authority doesn't even come by the Bible. It comes by Ellen White. So, you know.
Yeah, so, you know, all of their whole faith up in accepting the authority of White, and therefore even to doubt it would be to, you know, deny true Christianity, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%, yeah.
Well, let me tell you the quick anecdote my family has, because my grandfather and grandmother met. That's how they met and got married. Is they both worked at the Kellogg Sanitarium in Dallas, and so my grandmother verified so much of what came out in the Road to Wellsville movie. That's about the Kellogg Sanitarium. So just heads up for those who are interested.
Yeah, hey, you know, let's talk about that on the other side of the break. I'm glad you brought that up. We're chatting with Arthur and Theresa Beem, B-E-A-M, and we'll be right back.
Welcome, Daniel. You're on the line. What's on your mind, brother?
Hi, I just wanted to share a testimony about Virgin Most Powerful Radio. I had a buddy at work who, you know, he's a lukewarm Catholic guy, and I wanted him to start listening to the Terry and Jesse show, so I kept telling him to download the app, and he kept putting me off. So one day, I grabbed his phone, and I downloaded the app for him. I went on vacation, and, you know, I kept telling him to listen to it. He would kind of put me off. I came back from vacation. He comes to my cubicle, and he says to me, "Hey, man, I've been listening to the Terry and Jesse show, and it's great." And it's made a big impact in his life. The guy, he's going to weekly adoration a couple times a week. He goes to the Mass in the morning. He's an on-fire Catholic, and he promotes the Terry and Jesse show on the Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Daniel, what a testimony. And I want to encourage our listeners to get those cards by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org and do what Daniel's doing. Go out and spread the faith by inviting people to listen to Virgin Most Powerful. Daniel, thanks for your testimony, brother. God love you.
You're welcome.
Genesis 1:27 says, God created man in his own image. Male and female he created them. According to Pope St. John the 23rd, it is not true that some human beings are by nature superior and others inferior. All human beings are equal in their natural dignity. May God help us to look upon everyone as a person created in His image and likeness, and treat everyone the same without favoritism or prejudice.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics, and we're chatting with Theresa and Arthur Beem about Seventh-day Adventism and specifically their teachings on health. And I'm sorry about that, Theresa. The music came up, and you were making a really interesting point about this movie called Wellville, I think it is.
Wellsville.
Wellsville, okay. Yeah, why don't you pick it up from there?
Well, I wouldn't recommend them watching it because it's rated R and it's pretty vulgar. But
yeah,
no,
they
I've seen
get
it.
That's the immoral part of it.
Yeah,
it's
they kind of mock the Adventist, health system because it was based. This whole thing was based on keeping people from having sexual temptation by eating a vegetarian diet. But so much of what my grandmother reported to me about working with Kellogg and at that sanitarium in Dallas. Now, there were sanitariums all over the United States well into the 1930s. And so, but the main one was there in Michigan. That was the original one, and it was huge, and it was international. But so she knew J. Harvey Kellogg, and she said that I don't know if I should say this, but he gave himself yogurt enemas. I mean, that was normal. That was a daily thing. And he was chaste. He and his wife decided to be completely chaste and live chastely, which is, it's actually okay with Catholics. But they adopted 25 kids. I mean, these people were very wealthy, very kind in many ways, but very, very radical in other ways. And so she told me some very odd things. And so the Road to Wellsville movie, as vulgar as it is, it's pretty on target as to what the Adventists believe as far as that is concerned.
Yeah, I know it's hard to recommend it because it's so immoral, but you really do get the idea of just kind of how quack science, Kellogg and these other people were buying into. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to it.
It's almost like the Sodom and Gomorrah of relativism.
Huh.
I don't get that.
In other words, if you were to pile all relativism into a big pile, you would end up with something weird like the Kellogg clinics and stuff like that, where everything was up for grabs as long as it was healthy and not causing you to have a normal sexual existence.
Right.
Yeah. So, in fact, Battle Creek is not too far from here. It's about an hour drive from the dojo. So,
oh,
we're familiar with it. Oh, yeah. So, but this becomes revelatory, and that's fascinating because it's not just speculation. You said that this was already very popular when she supposedly received this revelation on health. So, was this a way to popularize Seventh-day Adventism? Is to tie it into this growing movement?
I never thought about that.
I didn't either. She's a very unusual person. She grew up a hat maker's daughter. And there are some people that say, because they use these toxic chemicals,
mercury and
in making hats back then.
Oh, yeah.
That was part of her problem and maybe part of her revelations. That I don't know how much of that's true. It's so difficult. They want to not take on the fact that it is all Old Covenant in Christ. When Christ came, it was a fulfillment of the Old Covenant. They have a hard time with that, but they keep on going back with the whole mediating thing and the whole everything. All of this whole entire topic goes back to the Old Covenant.
Yeah, the Sabbath issue too.
Right. And so it's a little bit of a dichotomy to speak to them because they'll refuse that, but then they continue to talk about Old Covenant things. Mm-hmm. So really to reach them, for a Catholic, it's about loving them, listening to them, and you know what? Be a good, kind Catholic and just get rid of some of the bad information they've been given for ever since Ellen G. White.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't know what we believe. They've been told what they think we believe, and most of it's baloney.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And being a good, kind Catholic to them to see what Catholicism really is one of the best witnesses, if you will, to them you could possibly do, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, one other quick thing is that Ellen White taught that the gospel was not enough. In other words, there was a new revelation she was giving the world through this vision that would sustain people in the last days. And so she wrote, it's the Lord's design that this restoring influence of health reform shall be a part of the last great effort to proclaim the gospel message. So that's one of the things she wrote. This is very intricate to those thought processes of Adventists, is that part of purifying Christianity is to purify them through health. You know, a pure body makes a pure spirit. A pure body makes a pure morals. And so this is very much the idea that we're creating a pure church in order for when Christ comes again to meet his pure and spotless and holy. And she believes that, God believes that we can achieve that through purity of eating habits.
Right. Right.
Interesting. Yeah. So, boy, as you're talking, I was thinking about all the different tie-ins with, another break-off group from the Adventist movement, Jehovah Witnesses, with this idea of like an end-time messenger, the midnight cry.
Right.
Yeah. And like you said, I know with Seventh-day Adventists, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to engage in, apologetics in the normal sense. That you, I think your counsel is very wise. That in a way, arguing actually could make things worse. You need to have trust.
They dig in at that point. They think that like you read in Revelation, they read everything into as if they are who they're talking to, John's talking to in Revelation. The remnant. She likes calling themselves the little flock and the remnant and those who don't partake of flesh and all of these things. So actually battling them on that level makes them dig in and just verifies all this stuff.
Yeah. Very interesting. So I lost my thought. Today, with Seventh-day Adventism, is the church at all trying to distance itself from Ellen Gould White, or is this still very much a part of the fabric?
Well, we just had, the Seventh-day Adventist Church just had a world conference a couple of years ago, and then every 4 years they have this world conference, and then general conference, and then they have what's called their annual councils between it. And at the world conference, they again repeated Ellen White is the prophetess of our time. They doubled down on that, and then in the annual council that they just had this last November, they again all voted on Ellen White. Each time they get together, that's one of the first things they do, is they reiterate that Ellen White is their prophetess. And so while they do this, there's a lot of kids that grew up that really kind of are not that interested in what the church has to say. They'll be Seventh-day Adventists and take on the name, but they downplay Ellen White. So you see a generational pull on on Ellen White. So
okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, we only have about 5 more minutes, and I want to talk about your ministry because you two really exemplify what you said about this loving outreach to Seventh-day Adventists. Tell us a little bit about, some Beem Productions.
Well, we get together when we can because Arthur works very hard. He's a nurse, and because of the COVID situation, he's actually been working a lot more, and so very hard, keeping everybody alive. And so we haven't been able to do any videos lately, but we do have a YouTube channel for those Seventh-day Adventists, and actually even the Catholics could learn a lot more about Adventism if they're interested in helping an Adventist understand Catholicism. You can, we actually are trying to explain Catholicism to the Seventh-day Adventists
through Seventh-day Adventist phraseology and wording, so they understand it.
Right, so that they can, and we do have to, a lot of people, a lot of Catholics would say, wait, that's really an odd way to put it, but that's the way Adventists think, and you have to get past the language barrier, because they take words that are Christian words and they tweak them a little bit so they don't mean the same thing to Seventh-day Adventists. So you have to avoid a lot of words that Catholics would consider more liturgical words, words that they would grasp onto, and you can't quite say it like that to make sense to an Adventist. So we are presenting that on our YouTube channel, which is, you can just look up Arthur and Theresa Beem. You can look it up that way and find our channel.
Not to mention, my wife's written "It's Okay Not to Be a Seventh-day Adventist," which is on Amazon, and I gotta really thank Gary, because after coming on, we've gotten quite a few excellent reviews of it. And I'll tell you, the nice thing about "It's Okay Not to Be a Seventh-day Adventist" book is I think you can utilize the concepts of it in things other than with Jehovah's Witness or with anybody. There's history in there. It's just very helpful in a lot of different ways. Not to mention, it's just excellently written. And
thank you.
I think it's the best. It's not an anti-Adventist book. It's a explanation of Adventism, and it was written before we were even Catholic.
Right. Yeah.
And then the other part of her ministry also, she wrote a whole series called Mission Vatican. It's on Amazon also, which is exciting, interesting, and it is about the concepts that are going on now in Catholicism.
Yeah, versus Catholicism versus the world, basically.
Yeah, it is. It's excellent.
Yeah, it's great, and I highly recommend your work. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Listen to Gary as much as you can.
Well, thanks. That's Arthur and Theresa Beem, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, pick it up. Great material. Check it out on YouTube. And coming up this week, we got some power hitters coming into the dojo, Steve Ray, and a lot of other good friends. Coming up next, High Impact Catholic Talk coming at you with the Terry and Jesse Show. Great to have you on board. Thank you so much for listening to the program. God willing, we'll be back again tomorrow to do this thing called Hands on Apologetics. God bless everybody. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.